And we have Jim on the line with us to tell his story about his near-death experience. Jim, I appreciate you joining me today.
And thank you for having me.
So, as I recall, you did mention that you had a near-death experience, and that's why I wanted to talk to you briefly about. Can you take us back to the day that this happened?
Well, I guess I could start off by saying that 3 days before this happened, my partner came to me with a medical question, which he never did, asking me where you put your hands when you do CPR. So I've been a nurse for 33 years, and I told him about the CPR process. The day it happened, I was in the driveway cutting my bushes, and he was there, and my next door neighbor was there, and all of a sudden I just didn't feel myself. And it kept on. I told them that I thought I needed to lay down, so I went into the house and laid down. They followed into the house. But then I had to get up to use the restroom, and when I got up, they heard the noise when I hit the bedside table and then the floor. And they came running in, and there was no heartbeat, and there was no spontaneous breathing. He began CPR.
So he began CPR on you.
Correct.
When, so did this, see, how can I say, so you did not know what was going on. All of a sudden you were just out of it, correct?
I was just gone. I just hit the floor and dropped dead.
Wow. And what year was this?
I kind of felt cheated because you don't get to say goodbye to anybody, and you don't get to tell your loved ones you love them or anything. It's just everything ended for me.
Yeah. So when this gentleman, he came to do CPR on you, what do you remember from that point on?
The only thing that I remember during that period was the neighbor had called 911, was on speakerphone, and my partner was listening to the dispatcher, and I could hear her say, "I want to hear you count." And she was going 1, 2, 3. That's the only thing I heard. I knew people were talking, but I couldn't hear anything. The only thing I heard was the phone operator.
Wow. Now, when you died, do you know how long you were gone for?
No, and I know some people expect documentation about that.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't any. I don't even know how long it was between that time and the time the paramedics got here. So I can't give you an answer for that. I don't know, because by then I was in no sense of distance or time. It wasn't important.
Yeah.
At that time.
So did you have, so during this time period when you were, let's just call it dead, do you recall having an experience of anything? Seeing anything, going somewhere?
Yes.
In
between the CPR, which I had a glimpse of, and hearing the phone operator, I was kind of floating above my body. I could tell I wasn't alive. It was kind of strange.
Mm-hmm.
But the paramedics got there, and I was hovering just above them. I couldn't hear anything that was being said, but I could tell that they were intense with their actions. They put the defib pads on me. They intubated me with the breathing tube. They started an IV on me. They even drugged me to another part of my bedroom where they could get to me better. Yeah. I watched all this.
So when you were watching this, Jim, and this is a question I actually have for quite a few individuals, and I'm sure at the time you're probably not focused on this so much. I don't think anybody would be, just because you're like, what's going on? But if you look back and try to remember, do you how can I say, did your consciousness seem more aware than it does right now, like a heightened aware of consciousness? If that makes sense.
I'm sure that it is, but I don't think you're aware of that. I think it happens kind of automatically.
Yeah.
The only thing I can remember is looking and thinking, gosh, that must hurt by doing what they were doing to me. But I didn't feel any pain. I didn't hurt at all.
Yeah. So what happened? So when you were looking down, so you were seeing everything that was going on. You were seeing the CPR. You saw the paramedics. Pretty much you saw everything that was happening. What do you recall after that point?
That's when all of that went away. And I seem to have floated a little bit more up, I think. And that's when I saw what I call the great light.
Yeah. So.
And it was warm. Go ahead.
So I'm guessing that great light that you're talking about is what other individuals describe as the tunnel, I'm assuming?
I don't specifically remember a tunnel per se. It was more, I was right there. I didn't seem to have to travel. Where a lot of people have the tunnel kind of experience.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have that. I was just right there with it.
Okay. So when when you saw this great light, as you describe it, did you see any other individuals, entities, souls, as some other people have?
I saw one other figure. It was behind my right shoulder, and it was like a shadow figure, kind of robed, with a hand outstretched. It never spoke to me. I never reached out to touch the hand. But next to him was like 3 or 4 stairs into the same light that I was experiencing. So it seemed like I was going to the same place if I did take his hand.
Yeah. So you said he was wearing a robe. What was it, like a white kind of robe?
No, sir. It was just all dark. It was all black.
Okay.
It was like more of a silhouette kind of thing.
Gotcha. So did you both talk or have some form of telepathy back and forth?
Yes. The great light was really, it was brilliant. I don't think humans could look at the light, but it was brilliant and warm and inviting and inclusive, and it kind of enveloped me into itself. And yes, we did communicate. To begin with, I thought that we talked to each other like you and I are talking.
Yeah.
But then in thinking about it, I realized it was more telepathy. We could understand each other and hear each other, if that's quote here, unquote.
Yeah.
Each other. It told me 3 truths. That's what I call it, is the truths of what they said to me. The first thing was continue to do good toward others without expecting a return, and that is your reward. And if you have little and still give, your reward is even greater. And I understood that. I'm kind of a giver in life, and I understood that. The second one was that when people die and they cross over, they're allowed to come back in spirit form to help comfort and reassure their loved ones. And what I took from that was that we should look for the signs from those who have gone on, but are hoped and prayed back, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I say look for the signs. And the third thing was that we would be reunited with each other, not because we were, quote, family, unquote, but because of the love that we share between each other. And I thought that was pretty comforting to know that you would be reunited, not because of bloodlines or anything like that, but because that you loved each other. That's the three truths.
Wow.
But throughout speaking about this, I was told that I would have to return, and I didn't want to. I wanted to stay. It was an awesome, awesome place to be. The Great Light never identified itself, and it never identified where we were.
Mm-hmm.
If you talk to a Christian and tell them this story, they tend to think that it's Jesus or God in heaven. I can't verify that.
Yeah.
That's why I call it the Great Light.
Well, calling to the Great Light sounds like that's actually a reasonable term, because what you experienced, I mean, it was a great light. I don't think, and I'm not speaking for you, but that sounds like something you just can't put into words easily in your human's form, because I'm sure it's beyond.
I find it, right. I find it very limiting to be human.
Yeah.
Opposed to where I was. We're limited physically, we're limited mentally. And I think we're only given as much as we're able to handle as far as messages are concerned. But it's hard to find the right words. It seems so minimal to just talk about it when it had such a huge impact on me.
Now, when you saw this great light in this, I'm just going to refer to this being as the individual. Did you feel like that was home?
Yes.
You did. Okay.
Yes. I felt like I was where I was supposed to be. I was home.
Well,
and it was wonderful.
That is interesting. Wow. And were you given an option to stay or come back, or it was just kind of you knew what to do because you mentioned if I took that individual's hand, I would stay? Did you have that choice?
I believe that I had a choice in that matter. I don't know what that means, but I seemed to have a sense of free will at that point. But the Great Light kept telling me that I would have to return, and I kept saying that I wanted to stay, and I didn't want to go back. And the third time, it told me that I would have to return because my work wasn't done yet. And like I said earlier, there was no sense of time or distance.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know how long it was that it took me to agree. I eventually and reluctantly agreed to go back if that's what I had to do. And that's when I immediately went back into my body. And I woke up on a ventilator in intensive care in the hospital.
Wow.
And I motioned for the nursing staff to give me a piece of paper and a pen. I was still intubated and still on a ventilator. And they gave it to me, and I wrote down the Great Light. And it almost gives me chills to think about me doing that. That was the very first thing that came to my mind when I woke up.
Well, Jim, I can tell you this. You just gave me chills, because what you just said when you woke up, the first thing you did was you wrote down the Great Light. And did any of your healthcare providers see that at the time, what you wrote down?
I don't remember anything up to the point of discharge.
Wow.
I don't remember anything about my hospital stay at all. At all.
So if I can ask
I was only in the hospital 3 days.
Oh, 3 days.
3 days. And I was in cardiac rehab for 3 months.
Wow.
Changed my life.
I bet it did, Jim.
I mean, I'm not any better than anybody else. I consider myself a pretty humble person. But I looked like Jim and I sounded like Jim, but I was just different inside. I don't think you go through this and not come out on the other side very different.
Oh, of course. And I just wanted to say, we had a friend in the family, and he is alive still. He's a good friend of ours. He had a near-death experience, and let's just say this, he describes himself as wasn't a great guy, and I knew exactly what he was talking about. He had a heart attack, and all he remembers is utter torment. And he said it was more real than anything here on earth. And he came back, and within a split second, he was a totally different guy. And even to this day, it completely changed him. And he said something to what you said. It's, you can't go through something like this without being changed. It just completely changes you inside and out. And yeah, he says, he is still human. He still makes mistakes like we all do. We're not perfect, but it's a huge learning experience, and it opened his eyes. Like, what we're going through here on earth it's not the ultimate eternity. This is just like a warm-up in a way, the big test.
Right. And this is the test. Right.
Now, Jim, going back, before you had this experience, did you believe in any of this type of stuff?
I was raised Catholic,
Mm-hmm.
but in my search for God, I attended many denominations to find my own way in dealing with my spirituality. So I have to say that it was nothing like I had been taught or led to believe. There was no judgment. There was no wrath, no fury, no darkness. It was just all that unconditional love. That's everything that I felt. And it's overwhelming because we don't have that here on earth.
Yeah.
The unconditional love part.
Well, you know what?
Was really remarkable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because that's one takeaway I get from all these experience stories that I hear. Each person's experience is a little bit different. I mean, if they were all the same, you kind of admit it's like, okay, they're all the same. We've heard them all, but they're all very unique. Right. But the big takeaway that everybody tells me is the utmost feeling of love that they feel. Right. It's a love that they can't describe. Like, you feel love here, it feels phenomenal, but they said there is so much more amazing, that feeling, than it is any time you've experienced it here on earth.
That's absolutely right. It is undescribable how awesome it is. I don't think that anybody can really explain that. It's overwhelming and it's wonderful, and I felt a bit cheated when I came back. If faith is believing in things unseen, and I've seen a part of this, I felt a little robbed in the faith department, if that makes sense.
Oh, it absolutely does, Jim.
And I also felt very guilty about coming back when there are so many people that are so much better than myself that I think should have come back and been with their family and loved ones. But I eventually kind of concluded that it wasn't my call.
Yeah.
I didn't have a say in the matter as far as anybody else trading places with me or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jim,
It's a lonely experience.
Well, I wanted to tell you this. So I myself, so I am a Christian myself, and I've heard a lot of people mention that as well. And I think, you know what, things come down to God's will. I think He lets certain individuals have these experiences for a reason. And this is just my personal take. I'm not speaking for you or anybody else. But society has moved drastically away. Not everybody, but a big portion of society has moved away from faith, God, these great teachings of love, respect, and I think God gives specific individuals little glimpses of the other side just to reassure, hey, I'm here. This is real. So take what I show you and, talk about it. Everybody doesn't get to experience that, but, I'm not God. I'm not talking for Him, but that's just what I get out of this. He wants to give people the reassurance that, what, just because you don't hear about Him from everybody doesn't mean He's not there. And that's my personal belief on it. I think He wants to give people such as yourself, the experience to let them know, you know what, this is more real than your place on earth. And I want, you have a job to do, and you may not know what that job is, but when the time is right, just talking about it, Jim, I think that's a positive thing. And that's a great thing because other people need to hear what you have to say. And that may encourage them to come forward with their story as well.
Well, I'll tell you, it's been 5.5 years, and you're the first person that I publicly talked to about this. But it's kind of a lonely existence. I thought I was the only one that this happened to, and I was reluctant to talk about it. And in thinking, what is my work that's not done yet? I thought I was supposed to part the Red Sea or something wonderful and exciting and, wondrous.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, I think that just maybe telling others my story might give them some hope and some peace, or maybe answer some of their questions that they might have. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing on the other side. I don't fear death. I don't feel lonely anymore because I did find online, I found groups that had the same experience as I do. Everybody's experience is different, just like you said.
Yeah.
It's unique to their own self. And it's also unique to their understandings and their teachings. I recently talked to a lady who had a near-death experience when she was younger, and she was telling me about it, and it seemed age-appropriate, if that makes any sense.
Well, of course it does.
It has a lot to do with the person and why these things are similar but so different at the same time. It's difficult to explain the unexplainable.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I don't think we're meant to fully understand these experiences. That's, you know what? With God or heaven, whatever you want to personally call it, you know what? I described it to someone this way. If we could comprehend it, then what's the point of even having the experience? I mean, it's so much beyond what we can imagine, and I think in a good way. I mean, I think what you experienced is just a fraction or 0.000 something % of the real thing. And I think what you saw was...
you're right about that.
I don't think you saw heaven yet. I think you saw the path leading to the entrance.
I think so too. I don't think that I saw the whole thing.
Oh, no.
But I think that we're also very limited. I think God knows how limited we are. I don't think we could take in all of that. It'd be too overwhelming to understand everything or to see everything. I think we're only given glimpses. And like you said, to share with others, to give them some kind of message. The message would ultimately be love each other the way you want to be loved. That's
correct.
The message was love.
Well, you know what, and going back to what you were saying about faith, even though you've experienced something, I do recall, faith is, believing in what you can't see. I mean, it's like I have faith that I'll make it through the day. You can't see what's going to happen at the end of the day, but I have that faith. And there's individuals who will never experience what you did until their time comes. But I do believe, it was an honor. You were intended to go through this experience. And I think it's a wonderful thing, Jim. I really do, because it's the calm you just brought me right now, and I can hear it in your voice, and I think the listeners will also hear it as well. Just talking to you, you sound so humble, and you can tell that when you first talk to somebody. You can get you can get that impression, and I know, I can just hear it in your voice. Just like everybody else I talked to that had very similar experiences, such as yourself, and it changes them, and it can be confusing. And like you said, you feel alone, but at the same time, you still have that reassurance of what you experienced. It was real. It wasn't a dream.
Right.
It was real.
Right.
So just knowing that brings to me a sense of calm, because you know what to expect in the future, but the only thing you don't know what to expect is, okay, now what's the other greatness beyond that?
Right.
And I think that's a comforting thing.
Right. Yes. I'm not worthy to be a messenger. I understand that.
Yeah.
It humbles you greatly to think that if you can say to be chosen for this, I'm very different since this happened to me. I used to be a very public person and very outgoing, and I'm more reserved now, and I'm more aware of the spiritual things around me.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that I get very anxious in crowds because I can feel things that I used to not be able to feel from others. And at times I'm almost bombarded by the things that happen to me that I have to leave. I actually have to leave and not be around a great many people because of that reason. So if there's any heightened awareness, that's what's happened to me.
Well, I can tell you, Jim, I can actually relate to you in that department, because I was in the military and I do have PTSD. So I completely understand what you're talking about kind of like a social anxiety type of deal. Oh, I totally know the feeling. I understand that part of what you're talking about. And that, indeed, my friend, that is very real. That's very real.
Yeah.
And it's, but the thing I know is, I can overcome it, but at least with you, there's a greater, how can I say this? There's a greater and ultimate, creator in control, and they see everything you're doing. They're with you and with us all the time. So what do you do in those situations? Do you think back to your experience, or is it just a feeling now of kind of like a social anxiety?
I don't really think it's a social anxiety as much as I get anxious with groups of people, if that makes any sense.
It does.
I feel things I feel the spirits of people around me much more intensely. And sometimes I get bombarded by so many of those things hitting me at one time. I'm not a psychic, and I'm not a faith healer or anything like that.
Oh yeah.
I'm just very aware of the spirit of others and how it affects me. It becomes overwhelming. That's the best way I can say it. I guess you can call it social anxiety.
So can I put it this way? So it's like when you first meet somebody. Let me use this as an example. When you first meet somebody, including like meeting me, you don't know the individual and you just get that sense of what they're like, that first impression. Is that what you're referring to? Like you just feel how their spirit is?
Yes, it's pretty immediate, I have to say. And we don't have to really even be introduced, or I can just look around the room and things come to me. That's the best way I can say it.
Yeah. No, I understand.
It used to scare me to happen. It used to really scare me. But now I'm more able to understand it, and I'm more able to control it because I know what to do and what not to do, or how I can avoid it, of being bombarded anyway.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like with my PTSD and my anxiety at first it was very difficult. I mean, I could not stand it. I couldn't do certain things. I was very controlled within my own mind. But what I did is I slowly learned how to use it for positive instead of all this negativity. So now I take all this that's inside of me and I use it towards good things. And I've noticed that really helps.
I absorb that too. Go ahead.
No, and I was just saying, and that's what I did. I finally learned how to flip it around and use it for good instead of pushing me down.
Right. Exactly right. That's what I've learned to do too. I absorb it now, freely, and distribute what I need to distribute. So good for you and good for me too that we're able to deal with things like that.
Indeed.
I believe there's a sense of PTSD in people that have this experience because it is such an overwhelming experience to have.
Well, it's very traumatizing.
Not everybody gets to do this. Yeah.
Your experience, it is very similar to PTSD, and yours is like mine and mine is like yours. They're essentially the same. The only difference is the experiences that you and I have had are different, but the outcomes can have the same effect. And while mine came from combat, yours came from something that was like, even I can't imagine what that's like. But in a way, it's a good thing what you experienced, but I think the traumatic part was like, it's just so overwhelming, you don't know how to process it.
Right. It takes time. It really does take time and thought and to absorb what has really happened.
Yeah.
And to be able to just take a breath and realize it's okay. It's really okay.
Correct.
And your PTSD is just as important to you. Your experience with that is just as important to you as mine is to me. Everybody has their own story in life, whether it's near death or not, because your experience is just as important to you as anybody else's experience is to them.
Well, yeah, you're totally right on that point.
It's an understandable thing.
Well, it might.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay, Jim. The takeaway I get from this, and you may have the same thing, is even though we've had these experiences, and now the question is, what do we do with them? What positive outcomes, or how can we use this for the better? And
Right.
from listening to you, the takeaway I'm getting is, it made you a much better person. It made you actually reach down into your soul, do some soul searching, made you more humble kind of guy. And I think that was on purpose. Whatever the other side does for us, there's always a reason behind it. And when you experience that love, I know behind, your experience, no matter what you feel, even if it's an uncomfortable feeling, it's ultimately about love. And we may not comprehend that just yet, but I think as the years go on, it'll all start to come to you in pieces. It may not come to you at once, because I know there have been a couple experiencers that I've talked to where, it finally clicked 20 years later, because every year there is like a puzzle. They were trying to put all the pieces in place before they told their story, because they didn't want to sound ludicrous. And even though it's not ludicrous, they wanted to make sure that their story was absolutely correct and they could process it themselves before sharing it. So some people can take a couple decades. Some people may take a year. I mean, it all depends, but you have to be comfortable with coming out about your experience, because and the positive thing is too, Jim, you're going to change people to tell their story, I believe.
Yes. I have told my story online, and in reading it, it seems so inadequate that I don't have the right words to fully describe the experience, or it's just inadequate, I think. But you're right, it takes time. Everybody has their own time. And I think it's because we don't really have the words or the understanding until time passes by and we can process it and share it with others and give others hope that death isn't the final journey in all this. You have to give a message of hope, because that's what it is.
Well, yeah. So the big question I have for you, and this might sound like a ridiculous question now to even ask, but there's people that listen that still want to know a yes or no to this question, no matter what story you tell. Okay? And the question is now, Jim, without a shadow of doubt, do you believe that there is life after death?
Absolutely. I don't even have to think about that.
I agree with you, and I think a majority of our audience will.
I hope so.
I really do.
Because it's beautiful on the other side. Our bodies are just a shell, and we're very limited by that shell. But there's so much more, because the spirit lives on. The soul lives on. And into another dimension that we don't know yet, I would say. Not even myself, because I don't know that I experienced the whole thing, if that makes any sense.
Oh, it does. You just got a glimpse.
Exactly right. I saw a small portion of what is going to be available for all of us. It's really humbling to even recognize that. It takes a while to understand that it's so big.
Yeah. Wow. I got to tell you,
there is
Jim,
life after this.
Well, and I agree with you there, brother. I do believe so too. There was, and I just wanted to say this. There was someone I talked to in the past, and they're like, I can't comprehend or understand God. That's why I don't believe in it. And my response was, you know what? If I could completely comprehend life after death and God, that would not be a God you would want to worship, because he's so bigger than our brain.
Right.
I mean, it's like,
exactly right.
It's like past time. It's like beyond time and space. Beyond.
Right.
And even science, Science has even proven that other dimensions exist. And yeah, God in heaven or the other side, that is another dimension. But science already proved, yeah, they exist. It's real. It's just we can't see it because, well, first of all, God and the other side's ultimately in control. So it's, I don't think they're going to let us even get there. Like, nope, sorry, you got to wait. And it's, no.
Well, we are kind of shielded. If it makes any sense, we're shielded in the fact that we don't know everything or see everything because it is too overwhelming to the human mind or body. It's too much. That's how absolutely awesome it was. From what I experienced. It's more than we could possibly absorb as humans. Because we're very limited, actually.
Yeah. That's absolutely amazing. And going back to what we're limited by, it's kind of like if you look at a fan blade, when a fan's turned off, you can't see through the fan blade because it's blocking the view. But once you turn on the fan and it starts spinning, you can see right through it. And that's what I think our brains are. It's like a giant fan blade. You can only see so much, but then beyond that, there's way more. But that blade... That's a very good way to put it. Very good. I'll always remember that for you saying that. The fan blade.
That's true.
Yeah. Well, that's the only thing I could think of because, when you turn on a fan, the blade is still there. It's just moving so fast. You can end up seeing through it.
Right.
So at least that's how I picture the brain. It's a filter.
Yes. That's a great way to put it, Elijah. That's really a good way to do it, to view it.
Well, I got to tell you, Jim, your story has been absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it really was. It's just, I'm sorry, but I don't have words. I don't. I don't.
Well, I understand that. I understand that perfectly.
I know you do.
But thank you.
You're very welcome.
I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to talk about it.